Nope, that's fine. If you can pull up the financial plan, I'm just going to have you go through some graphs when we get to that point.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I think everybody's good to go. Go ahead.
Let me jump in.
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think we can skip the introductions. I think I know everyone. Everyone knows me, but Eric Walsh with Baker Tilly. Once again, we're here to discuss budgets. I think most of the department heads, finance committee members, administration have in front of them two packets of information. The loose bound stapled information are your budget worksheets. So these are department heads, everything that you've worked with Lori, the mayor, and then our team over the last couple of months, what you guys typically refer to as your Form 1s. Council last time I was here, or committee last time I was here, we went through these in draft. I would say these are 95% final at this point. The only numbers waiting on changes, and I'm sure there'll be some discussion about this, is the 100 level. So that's salaries and wages. Lori is currently updating both for COLA adjustments, but also I think you just got your health insurance premium increases for next year. So she's going through all of her individual worksheets and adjusting those. So those numbers could change, probably will change in this, but as I'll talk high level, up or down, depending on which way they go, where your budgets sit right now, you have a buffer in there that you're still going to have a balanced budget, which is, I think, the main thing for the last couple of years you guys have tried to get to, which means your revenues are at least equal to or outpace your expenditures. Okay. So as you guys, department heads, see these numbers, keep in mind, Lori's, probably in the next week or so, still adjusting some of those 100 level accounts. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these worksheets because committee, we went through these in detail last time. I'm just going to go to kind of the bottom line, but I would ask department heads, committee, administration, if there's individual line items you want to point out, do so. I'm going to call out a few things in this, but if there's things that there's a story behind it or you all have questions, I'm sure you guys have looked at this from the last meeting to this meeting. Let's have that discussion now. But then I'm going to spend more of the time on the big bound packet that you guys have in front of you, the fiscal sustainability plan. So this is the 5-year outlook. So what this does is it takes this year's budget and it takes 3 years of historical trends, both revenues and expenditures by each department and by each fund of the city. This includes TIF as well, redevelopment in it. And we extrapolate it out for 5 years. So I'm going to show you some charts and some graphs that are going to say, okay, if our spending trends continue, if our revenues trends continue, and I'm going to talk about SB1 because we've estimated SB1 impacts in here too for lit and property tax. You'll actually see the first impacts of that in your 26 numbers that I'll show you. And then we have your capital plan. I think that's the key to where Auburn sits today. Why you're in pretty good shape is you have a very robust capital plan that each department head, council, and administration have worked on and tweaked over the years. We know the big projects that are coming, both utility, redevelopment, and city, and we have a funding plan for pretty much the majority of those that we're talking about. Okay, that's the big ticket items that move the dial. So you'll be able to see this fund by fund, department by department. When you see some changes in those graphs, it's typically going to be driven by that capital spending. Everybody good with the agenda? All right, so let's go back to the loose leaf. Again, I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, so please interrupt me if my head's down and you have a question. The first one I'm going to talk about, though, is the general fund, the thickest one. You can see under the title where it says 1101 general fund. That's how you're going to tell these apart. The first page on this is the revenues, actually first page and a half. Then we start getting into the department expenditures starting on the third page, and you'll see on the left-hand side, this has every department: mayor, clerk treasurer, common council, port authority, municipal general, so on and so forth, all the way down. Where I want to draw your attention to, though, is if you go to the second page from the end, and you look at the green column, and you look at the bottom number, 621,400. Does everybody see where I'm at? This is what we're managing to, cash flow, okay? You have cash in the bank, you have healthy cash reserves in most of your funds, except for a couple, but general's one that you are healthy in. What I really focus on, or what we really focus on, is from year to year, are you balanced? Are you adding to that surplus? Are you dipping into that surplus? Some years when you have capital, or some years when you have an unknown issue, like going back to COVID, going into SB1, there could be some changes in funding cycles, et cetera. That's why you want a reserve to rely on. But this is a year we're projecting in 2027, you'll add about $620,000 to your cash reserves if you spend all of your budget. With the caveat, Lori's still making some changes to the 100 level accounts, but that's not going to change this dramatically one way or the other from this story. If you go back to the left-hand three columns where you see 2023, 2024, 2025, you can see this is a continuation of adding to your cash balances. Keep in mind, we're shifting some levy and have been shifting some levy over time to some other funds. If you remember a couple of years ago, we had that discussion about the park funding. We took from general, we shifted some things to park. We had some expenditures we added to general, et cetera. Probably a question many of you on committee are thinking is, okay, how does SB1 change this? I'll talk about that when we look in the bigger book, because you're going to see those impacts coming out in future years, especially with the lit adjustments. Anybody want to go through anything specific, any department heads that are contained in the general fund, any items you'd like to call out, any questions on specific line items from committee? While you're looking and thinking, because I don't like silence, I'll talk. The piece to this as well, Lori will publish your advertisement towards the end of September. I don't think we're going to have changes really other than the 100 salaries, wage, health insurance pieces. If there is a number that needs changed or adjusted, we're looking around the third week in September. So that gives us enough time to work with Lori to make changes in Gateway before that advertisement. After the third week in September, I would say no more adjustments unless you're reducing. Okay. Last page 2 on general, you'll see this on every one. I'm not going to call it out in every fund, but the very last page, this is the capital snapshot. This is the departments that fall into the general fund's capital snapshot. You'll see one of these in each. So like you see the mayor's department, building department, IT, streets falling into this, or a portion of streets because some of the projects being funded here. You'll see like in MVH, you'll see streets in MVH, you'll see in park, you'll see a park snapshot. In the book that I'm going to go through in a little bit, you'll see this all comprehensively. In this, we just break it down by fund and give you a snapshot. Okay, the general fund is funding what? So you can kind of tie between the budget and these numbers. I'll show you this all holistically in the book. Next one I'm going to go to is MVH and MVH restricted. So 2 funds here, but we like to look at them combined, even though Lori has to separate them on her books, but we really look at it from the revenue source, because your primary revenue sources here are state distributions from gas tax as well as some property tax coming in. If you go to the second page though, and you follow that green column, which is your 2027 budget to the bottom, you'll see again, estimated surplus, even if you spend the entire budget of about $113,000. And if you go one more page, you'll see local road and street, which is a separate fund, but goes to fund typically capital and other services that are related to the street department. So this is a fund that's separate from MVH, but is used by your street department. Again, this is the fund accounting side of state budgeting. Again, you'll go to that bottom number, about $115,000 surplus there. Local roads and streets has no property or income tax going to it. It is all funded by those state distributions from the gas tax. And then again, the last page shows you all of the capital over the next 5 years. You'll see there's a lot of things going on in the street department, CCMG funding for a lot of these, but also included in both of those, or all 3 of those funds I just talked about. And I know I glossed over this, but I want to just, again, give kudos to everybody really in this room, from department heads to council to the administration. This is the key to good financial planning. This is the thing so many cities, counties miss, is they don't take the time to build these multi-year capital needs lists, and they just go from year to year to year, and they say, well, Did our budget go up from last year? Okay, increase it X percent, and they don't know what's coming out 2 and 3 and 4 years from now. When you get to big ticket items, you have to take that into account because you may have to build up cash reserves for it. You may have to do a financing. You may have to mix your funding between redevelopment, utilities, property tax, income tax. This is no small feat. And I think the council committee understands that, but this is 4 years in the making to get to this point now, to where it kind of works like clockwork. And I know it's not an easy lift for the department heads, but every year now they know the drill. They sit down with their capital plan. We did this, we didn't do this, we moved this here. They sit down with the mayor. They say, this is what I'm planning to do. And we have 5 years of a forecast that makes you guys, as the elected fiscal body, an easier decision, right? Because you're not just looking at 1 year. You're saying, okay, we kind of know what's coming. We feel confident we can afford this not only today, but as it compounds 5 years from now. So thank you all.
I have a question.
Yes.
Gas tax amnesty program we're living through. Have you got any indication if their state's going to be able to make up that funds and us still get the money that we deserve?
I don't have any insider information. I will say, Lori, do you have something to add?
Well, two things. Yes, we've actually already received those funds, which was going to lead me to this question on this, which is really just pertains to me. But should it be separated? So separated, I should see.
I'm not following.
Separated when I received it in to a different.
Restricted
holiday.
versus non-restricted portions?
No.
Gas tax.
Are you separated between MVH and MVH restricted, or what's
No.
separated? Okay.
Separately, so I mean it's in my description, but I'm still receiving it in the same,
I would put in your
New
memo
account.
line that it was the. I mean, it's just keeping you whole, to answer Councilman Webb's question. It's just keeping you whole. It's money you were going to get anyway. It's just
Right.
coming from state reserves instead of the
Right.
gas tax. So I would receipt it in the normal way, but put a memo in there that.
That was great.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Put it this way: it doesn't matter to you guys the source. It matters that you got the same amount of revenue you're supposed
Well, we
to get.
made sure to make sure to definitely in the description that it's titled that, so we can, if we need to go back and identify it, it's and it
Yeah.
comes separately anyway.
Yep.
So we've gotten 2 distributions to end.
So to go a little farther on your question too, Councilman Webb, all indicators right now is you're going to be kept whole. You're going to get that money. It's coming from state reserves because they're not collecting that revenue right now. Some discussion, this is not anything I would say is like set in stone or even ready to go to legislature, is there's some worry, could this impact the future community crossings grant dollars? I would say it's been talked about for several years now. Could community crossings grant be reduced and those dollars at the state level be used for some other new initiative the state legislature may focus on now that they've been focusing on paving for a lot of years? I don't know. That sounds sensical. The second piece I would say to that probably connects that dot is there has been a big push both the last few years with the new allowance and legislation, and then again with Senate Bill 1 and tying you having your own wheel tax to getting more CCMG money. I think that's a trend of saying, okay, we're going to get a lot of these local communities more self-sufficient on their own with their own wheel tax. And then it's probably easier if the state does pull back some of those dollars. That's my opinion. I'm not saying like that's going to happen, but I think that's logical.
Well, I agree, because the state's been trying to get the locals to do stuff for 10 years, and we're finally putting some teeth behind it now. So thank you for that. I did want to make a comment on streets for maybe future planning in my driving around the city and coming up Auburn Drive. The potential is getting into the straight lane there is pretty short. You can turn left easily onto Wayne Street, but the short lane that goes straight gets backed up, and that's something that maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, they may want to look at making that longer. I'm sure that budget-wise, they wanted to make that shorter because there was utilities that need moved and stuff, but
You're talking going eastbound, right?
westbound on Auburn Drive, and you come up and just the normal drive lane is left turn lane, and if you want to go straight down Auburn Drive, which would be like truck traffic and things going
Oh, you're talking at Wayne Street?
Wayne Street,
Okay.
the straight run is kind of short, and it's something that for way down the future. So I don't want to dwell on it. I just wanted to point that out. That's it. That's all I got for now. Till later.
Any other items on streets before we move on? Any specific line items anybody wants to pull out? All right, the next one is TIF. I know obviously redevelopment is an important component of TIF, but I think it's important obviously for the fiscal body to also see this. You'll see there's 3 different TIF areas. Largest one or most active one being the first one, 4445. But if you look at each of these, all 3, that bottom number in the green column, it's all positive. You will notice in 4445, which includes your 01, 08, and 2020 Northwest TIF areas, there's about $2.5 million in capital spending earmarked next year. That has to do with a portion of, if you go to the last page, you'll actually see this. If you flip with me to the last page and look at the 2027 column, you'll see these are components of second to last payment Auburn Development Group. So that was on the development from a few years ago, the $500,000 each year through 2028. Some downtown streetscape and parking for $500,000 is earmarked in there, and then a portion of the new police department building renovation and expansion. You'll see that capital number pop up in a few different funds, but this is the TIF portion that is proposed to be budgeted. All right, parks is the next one. You'll see there are 2 different park funds. The largest and first 2 pages is your normal park and recreation fund. That's the one you guys are all well aware of. It's the one that we moved some dollars to a few years ago from property tax from the general fund over to park. We've continued that in the 2027 budget. If you go to the second page, bottom number of the green, you'll see we're anticipating, even with the full budget spend, about a $50,000 positive cash flow. Again, parks is one of those I talked about earlier. The vast majority of your funds are in really good shape. Park is one you all know we've needed to build up over the years. You'll see we've done that for the last few years. We still need to continue that for a little bit with park. That's one I wouldn't want to be dipping into cash reserves for a few more years. The next slide is park non-reverting, small fund, kind of self-sustainable. The monies you bring in are the monies that you spend on different leagues and programs. And then the final page is that capital plan for park. This is one I think has had a lot of scrubbing over the years. If you remember a couple of years ago, there were some park projects trying to be funded from a bunch of different funds. I think that's one of the mayor's initiatives, and I think makes this a lot cleaner and easier for everyone to understand, is getting park projects back into park and saying, okay, we can only afford so much. Let's make this more self-sustainable.
And me and Eric have worked on that quite a bit. And I think everything this year and even last year mostly was funded from Parks budget itself, which was great. So it was a combined effort.
All right, next, fire territory. All right, we know this is one just based on statutory limitations and revenues that's had some budget tightness over the last few years. If you go to the second page, this is fire territory general, your largest operating fund for the fire territory. Bottom of second page, couldn't get away, just $2,400, Chief, that we're anticipating negative. So if Chief can underspend his budget by $2,400, you'll be fine in this one. That's close enough with your cash reserves. I'm not worried about it. But this is one we all know you don't have a whole lot of options. We've done some things here the last few years to be creative to make sure fire can keep operating the way it needs to, but also funded I'm not going to go into all the different things that you have, but going forward, I mean, there's a limited number of options how you kind of increase some funding in this area, but it's one you just got to, I would say, have at the top of your radar year in and year out from a budgeting standpoint. Anything, Chief, you want to add, or specific line items you want to call out? Got faith in you. The next page is your cumulative fire equipment. Remember, this one has a small tax-driven property tax rate, has to be used for capital. You do have $92,000 budgeted for capital. That's an overhead garage door at Station 1 and some miscellaneous firefighter equipment expenditures that you guys have every year.
So there'll be just some minor changes to that one, Eric. I was looking at that. Yeah, we put in money for the tender. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Spencer, did you get that? That's the, are you guys wanting to move? Yeah, 2027, that TBD tender 25 refurb. You said that's 150, Spencer. Did you get that? Okay. And capital. Oh, can you hear me, Spencer? Cume Capital Fire. Go to the capital tab. We have a TBD in 2027 right now for a tender 25 refurbish. They do have a dollar amount for that now. It's 125,000. So we need to change that. Make sure that gets on Lori's Form 1. That will draw, obviously, your positive cash flow on the third page. You go to that number in Cume Capital cumulative fire equipment where you had a bottom line number of 304,700. So you had a positive cash flow in there. That'll reduce 125,000, but your cash flow is good. You have the money to do it. No issue.
And on that one, I don't see on the Form 1, I don't know if he has those, but I'll make the change. It looks like the garage door for Station 1 is not on the Form 1, it's on the capital plan, so I got that, and then I'll send it over
Okay.
on that.
Okay. The last few, and then I'm going to get to the kind of main part of the discussion here, which is the budget book. Your last few are miscellaneous type funds. So these are not really owned by any department other than public safety lit. We'll talk about here in a second, but I'm going to start with the packet that has CCI on the front. So this is cigarette tax dollars, small fund. I'm going to focus on that green column. We're not anticipating actually spending anything out of it. So those cash reserves will roll over, positive. CCD is the next one. That's your Cume Capital Development Fund. That's that one that you have a 5-cent tax rate that we reestablished several years ago. You pretty much use this primarily for capital needs. You'll notice it does have a budgeted negative cash flow. You have plenty of cash reserve in that fund. What's being budgeted in 2027, though, from CD is a portion of engineering for City Hall, potential remodel, and then the engineering for the police department that I talked about in TIF. So that's that $700,000 you guys see in orange there. Totally fine with this fund having a negative cash flow. It's what it's intended for, is to build up and then use on capital projects. Next is CEDIT. That's your County Economic Development Income Tax. This is the one that will be changing if state law stays how it is here in a few years, but it stays pretty much the same right now for the next couple. You'll notice it has a negative cash flow as well of $1.2 million. In orange, you'll see on that page right above that in the green column, $2.3 million of capital spending. Again, the majority of that's that police department. Again, this is about 1.2 coming from CEDIT is anticipated there. And then there's some other potential projects as well, like part of the railroad overpass engineering, a small portion, some road projects related to Grand Staff, Cindy Street, et cetera. You can see all of that detail on the last page. Again, I don't have a concern with CDIT having that $1 million negative cash flow. I would focus you all at the committee and council level on, we have the cash reserves. Do we agree with the capital projects? This is what this fund's intended for. Again, you build it up over time, use it for some of these capital needs. So I would put the focus on your financial advisor saying you can afford it. Do you agree with the projects is the question. Then I'm going to transition to the last couple. The next packet, law enforcement continuing ed. Again, that's a small fund, positive cash flow, though. You don't spend a ton out of that. And then the next page is public safety lit. This is one that you guys get about $1.2 million in income tax and then some other revenues as well. You go to the bottom of that page, you'll see it's about an $820,000 negative cash flow. So this is another one of those funds that's not balanced this year, but that non-balancing is driven all by the orange lines, the capital budget there. Again, the main driver in this is part of that police department building. There's about 1.2 million coming from public safety lit. So if you kind of take that, the handful of funds that you saw that we had negative cash flows in, primarily driven by those large capital projects. It's hard to see in this because I'm splitting it up by each fund, so you can see that capital snapshot. When I go to this book, you'll see the capital snapshot all together, and you'll kind of see, like using the police department Reno as an example, you'll be able to see that kind of all together where it's getting split between the different funding sources. Any questions on the 27 budget? That's what I just went through there. It's got your historical trends as well before I go into the multi-year look. Any department heads, questions, comments, input?
I'd just like to extend what you stated there. For the PD, yeah, we see those negative cash flows, but the one thing I think is most important is, one, we're not taking out debt to do the project, and two, because if we do take out debt, that cost will be passed on to the taxpayers. I think it's pretty impressive that we can do this project and not take that in debt, which in turn, that's not being funded by the residents. So, obviously, it's a much bigger topic, and we've had some discussions on that. It's been a long time coming, but I think that's important too. That's also the way we're looking at the city hall renovations as well. Not taking out that. I think that's important. I think that says a lot to even previous administrations, but in this one, in the council, and department heads to be able to do this. We're looking at another $8 million between the two projects, and I don't know how many communities can actually do this. Great job, everybody.
That's a great point. All right, I'm going to go into the big book then. This is what we call, I think you guys have seen this in the past or snippets or different versions, but we call this a fiscal sustainability plan. We probably have, I would say, 60 to 80 cities and counties around the state that we do these for annually. What this really boils down to is it's kind of a three-part process. It's taking historical trends for 3 years on all your spending, all your different funds. So it's taking all that detail, taking all the trends for revenues, both state and locally generated, and we're extrapolating that out over 5 years. So it's a trend analysis to start with. The second component of that is then legislative changes. And it seems like every year for the last few years, there's been some impactful legislative change that affects local communities. So we're building those changes in on what we know today. Probably next year when I come back and we talk about this, will probably be something else that's changed. But this is based on legislation as we know it today and what those impacts mean to you from a revenue and expense standpoint. And the third, and I would say probably the most important pillar, and where you guys all play an important role as department heads, is the capital planning piece. Okay, because like I said, trend analysis can pretty well tell you 100s, 200s, 300s. I mean, your spending doesn't change dramatically from year to year. It's a historical trending. The 400 level, your capital or taking out any debt, piggybacking on what the mayor said, is what really changes your cash flow from year to year or on a forecasted trend. So those three components are boiled down into a fiscal sustainability plan. The reason we call it that is because what we're really checking is the decisions you're making this year in this budget sustainable into future years with all those changes I just talked about. Okay. A lot of data in this. There's a narrative at the beginning. I know some people are numbers people, some people aren't. I would encourage you, especially council and department heads, read the first few pages. That's a very holistic view of the city from a financial standpoint. And you may say as a department head, why do I care? I operate my department. I do my day-to-day. That's my job. I really think it's incumbent on department heads to understand how city government funds itself, because what you do in your department is tethered to the other departments of the city and vice versa. You kind of have to understand that holistic picture. All right, the first place I want to start though is on page 2 and the chart at the bottom. I think Spencer is going to pull this up, and maybe Spencer, you can make that a little bit larger if anybody's looking on the screen. But I'm going to go to the blue boxes at the bottom of page 2. And what this is showing is your income tax, okay? If you look at 23, 24, 25, 26, those are actual numbers. We know for 26 what you're going to get for income tax. And then we're estimating 27, 28, 29, and 30. The thing you'll notice right away is currently, and for the next few years, you get income tax into 3 different buckets. You get certified shares, which goes to your general fund. You get lit public safety, which goes to that public safety fund I just talked about a few minutes ago. And you get lit CEDIT, County Economic Development Income Tax, which goes to that CEDIT fund I talked about right before the lit public safety fund. So go out to the 2029 column. So second box, second from right, or bottom box, second from right. We're estimating if your current income tax increases, so the incomes of the county that you guys are collecting on, the incomes of the city, continue to trend the way they have the last several years, we anticipate under current legislation, and if the county keeps the same tax structure the next few years, you'll generate about $6.5 million in income tax. Now, 2030, under current legislation, there's talk of, will this be 29? Will it be at 30? It's in 30 right now. I think there's talk they intended it to be 29. We'll see how that shakes out. But right now, the impact would start in 30. If you adopted, or the county adopted, remember, this is where you have 2 options. You're a large enough city, you could adopt your own municipal lit, or you can opt into the county's lit and get your portion of that lit. What we're assuming here is that the city, because it's based on current estimates, better for the city from a revenue standpoint, you would opt into the county lit, and the county would keep a similar lit rate to what they have now. I am talking in total hypotheticals because this final decision will not be made for a few years, and the legislation will probably change before this decision. But what you all need to understand is the estimates in this report are things basically stay like they are now at the county, and the city makes a decision in a few years to opt into the county rate. A lot of things could change. There'll be a lot of people in different chairs. There'll be a lot of people making the vote that probably are not here today, however that all shakes out. We anticipate you actually would get a bump in revenues in 2030 at that time. Why is that? There's a lot of different reasons, but the simplest, and I'm overgeneralizing, is if you opt into the county rate, you now share your portion of income tax from the county. You're drawing in some higher incomes that are outside of city limits. Okay? Yeah, this is a phenomenon you see almost everywhere in the state, that you have some higher incomes, not in the fully rural, but kind of in the suburban, not in city limits. And it's not just in Auburn. You'd see this in Allen County with Fort Wayne and everywhere else. So opting in a lot of times is better for the cities, because now you're getting a bump from higher non-city incomes in the county. Does that make sense to everybody? Where if you do your own municipal rate, there are some cities that it's better to do your own municipal rate, but fewer. If you do your own municipal rate, that's only on the incomes of the city. You're not getting that bump from some higher outside city incomes. Does that make sense? That's an overgeneralization, but that's why you're seeing this estimated increase in 30. Last thing I'll say on that is, we don't have, the Department of Revenue does not have specific incomes by city yet. They don't track information. They're building that out right now. we're estimating this based on census and MHI data in city versus outside of city. So I think this is very directionally accurate, but this is not like to the $1,000 accurate. Make sense? Going over to page 3, I think this is a really good chart that you guys can start to see the first impacts of Senate Bill 1. In the top, city net property tax and property tax credits. So the top chart here, this is showing from 22 to 26, your certified and actual property tax revenues in thousands. So like it's 5.4 million in 2026. That's how you read that number. The 5,381, that's really 5.4 million. What you'll see is the green is your levy. So that's property tax. I just talked about income tax. Now I'm talking property tax. The green is your property tax revenues coming in year to year. The red is circuit breaker or tax loss. So that's taxes that would have been received had we not have 1%, 2%, 3% tax caps. Okay, so you don't get that money, but your max levy says that is your max levy. You just don't collect that piece because people's tax bills, once they hit the 1%, 2%, 3%, they don't pay the additional tax. That concept, that's not a new concept. I just want to make sure I'm not seeing anybody that's like, okay, what are you talking about? I think everybody at least understands circuit breaker high level. What you see in 26, still manageable, but 5 times what it's been historically. You went from about a $46,000 circuit breaker loss annually on the city side to about $250,000 in year 1. Why are you seeing that? Primarily because that's the first phase of Senate Bill 1, which included the homestead, the new homestead, the $300 or 10% homestead credit that you haven't had in the past. And it's the first phase of shifting. Do you guys remember when I was here last time, I showed you those 2 charts where the historical homesteads were based on fixed dollar amount, and now they're based on percentage. So what you're seeing is a shift of the credits. That's what you're seeing here. The driver, the biggest piece of that is that new residential $300 or 10%, the lesser of, that wasn't a credit historically, that is new in Senate Bill 1. Okay, so you'll see I'm going to forecast this out a little bit later for you, but you're going to see a higher circuit breaker loss. That is built into Lori's budget. All those numbers I just went through before include that higher number. Okay, manageable for Auburn. I don't want to be like Chicken Little here. Like, yeah, do you wish you had $200,000 more in your budget? I'm sure that you do, but this number is manageable for your, where you guys are the last several years of doing zero-based budgeting. You're in a good spot to handle this. Okay. Bottom chart, fire territory, same phenomenon. You lost about $30,000 last year to circuit breaker tax caps. Now you're going to lose about $170,000. The piece that I also want you to see though is, and it's in both of these, but fire really shows it. So in fire in 2025, you got $3,370,000 property tax revenue coming in. That's actual dollars received. This year, 2026, you're going to get about $3,354,000. Okay, so even though your levy went up every year, it goes up 3.5%, 4%. Your increase in the fire territory got totally ate up by Senate Bill 1. So in essence, your revenue stayed flat on the property tax side from 25 to 26. Make sense? Next chart, page 4. Again, top is city, bottom is fire territory. This shows your assessed value in purple. So this is in millions. So where you see the 711 in 2022, that's 711 million. This is assessed value. So the value of the properties in the city. Okay. You can see your growth over the last 5 years, very similar to other communities, has been good. You've grown over the last 5 years about 31% in assessed value, from $700,000 to almost $940,000, or $940 million, excuse me. Great growth. What that means is the yellow line is property tax rates have actually came down, pretty much flatlined over the 5 years. So now let's get into the intent of Senate Bill 1 and all the discussion points you hear about people, my property tax bills keep going up double digits and what's going on. This is where that all comes together. And I think it's very important you all understand this, especially elected official and fiscal body members. Auburn's, you can see it right here on the paper, Auburn's tax rate and the fire territory tax rate below that, the yellow line, have came down the last 5 years. What happens is, even though you're charging a lower tax rate, people's assessed values are going up double digits in some cases or trending up. So they're paying property tax on a larger valued property. So they look at their bill and they say, well, my dollar amount went up. Why are you charging me more taxes? You're not charging a higher tax rate. It's the value of their property going up, and property tax is a value-based tax rate. So as your property's worth more, you pay more on that property. Senate Bill 1 adds in those homestead credits I talked about, changes the trend from a fixed dollar amount to a percentage. So the intent is those reductions will keep up more with assessed value increases. Most places I'm going to are still getting the same complaints that my property tax bill is going up in year one of this because assessed value jumps are still outpacing Senate Bill 1. So we'll see what happens in the next legislative session. Any questions on that? Does that make sense to everybody, like high level, what's going on here? Okay. And you can see the fire territory on the bottom, same thing. Assessed value, the purple going up considerably, about 30% over the last 5 years. Tax rate actually coming down from the fire territory. So this is including some of the township folks. Next page, page 5. This is a stack chart of your income tax. So those 3 buckets of income tax I talked about on the prior one, this is a historical look. The gold or the orange in that is your supplemental lit. That's that thing you guys don't know you're getting every year, but you've gotten it the last several years. That's your dollars that have been held in reserve at the state. They're just releasing them over time. But you can see your total income tax, as you stack that on top of each other, has increased pretty good, actually a couple of $1 million over the last 5 years. So, you're looking at your 2 biggest revenue sources here. Property tax, the last couple slides, income tax, this slide. That's how you fund the vast majority of your governmental services. Page 6. Not going to get into all the numbers at the bottom on this, but this is a chart I think a lot of our clients skip over, but this is to me one of the most important charts, and hopefully you guys, because you've heard me say this for 5 years, you understand why now. The aqua in that graph is your budget for your main funds, okay? So general, MVH, parks, all of that. That's your budget. Not the entire city budget, but your main funds is the aqua. Gray is what you actually spent, okay? Go to 2025 and look how close those numbers are. That's what I've been preaching for years to you all and to Lori of, yes, it may have some additional appropriations, but get your budgets tight, okay? Because when you do this plan, if we make this plan based on 2024, where your budgets are you have way more budget than you actually spent, and keep in mind, 2024 was driven primarily by some stuff for capital that was budgeted that didn't happen, so I don't want it to be like you guys totally over budgeted in 2024. It's primarily some capital projects that didn't happen that were in the budget. But even if you go back to 23, where you spent about 89% of your budget in 23, 25, you're at 97%. That's like almost perfect. If I can, I always tell you, Lori, I want about a 3% buffer, right? You're right at 3% in 2025. What that does is it makes financial forecasting more accurate because you're budgeting what you're actually intending to spend. And yes, it keeps all your department heads in line with it because you don't have all these buffers in there that they can go, oh, well, this thing was more expensive than that thing. So I move around my budget items and I kind of stay under budget. It does what fiscal body budgeting is supposed to do. You all approve a spending plan that's very tight, and it forces your department heads to live in that spending plan or come back to you and say, hey, this thing happened I didn't expect. I need to spend a little bit more. Do you approve it?
Was 2023 the year we started the zero-based budgeting?
For 25.
Yeah, 25 is when we went really into zero based. We started in 22, 23
Yep.
on like the financial planning.
Yep.
But it kind of took us a couple years to build the program.
Yep.
We really dialed it. Like, this is what these worksheets, I
Yep.
call these zero based budget.
Right.
We started these in 25.
I know it took us a while to get there, but this, I mean, that's what you want.
It's a telling story.
Freaking perfect.
And I'm not, you'll see these in the future. Like if you see a 90, 95, what I really look for is, was that driven by operations or was that driven by capital? And that's why at the bottom, you see all these numbers. I actually get the individual funds, because if I see like CCD was the one we didn't, we had $1 million budget in CCD and spent zero. I know right away, okay, it was a capital project that drove this. But what I really am looking for is, are streets tight? Is general tight? Is parks tight? All your operating funds, are those staying pretty close? Because those are almost all driven by operational costs, and they are in this case.
And like we've said, it's okay to do appropriations. It's okay to do that if we have to. But
it's paperwork. I know clerk treasurers hate it. I don't want you to have 1 million of them, but that it seems so simple because you've heard me say it so many times. You're like, why does he keep beating this horse? I can't tell you how many communities and counties I go to that they don't get this piece of the process. Like, if you approve a budget that's 10% inflated, you're giving your department head, like, there's not a fiscal control then, because they can live easily within that budget without having to come back and say, this changed from my plan, I need more money. That's the intent of the additional appropriation.
And, we have 4 months left in the second year, the second budget that we've actually implemented, the zero base of 25 and 26. And we've not had any additional appropriation that's tied to the specific department budgets. We've done a couple, but one was moving some bond proceeds down to put towards a bond, but nothing tied to the specific departments. There's been no appropriations there, which is good. Well, we do our annual transfer, but that's fairly normal. So, that says a lot too for departments for utilizing and as you guys can say, living within your means. But they do a good job of tightening things up too. And if we have that need, then that's why we have that option.
But this is also telling to the constituents to say, this is what we've worked so hard to get to. And I mean, it's a matter of fact. I mean, you can look at this and say, we are living within our means. We are doing what we said we were going to do. And it's right there. I'm thrilled.
And if somebody looks at this, the one a naysayer could take and say, oh yeah, but it looks like, if you look at the gray, well, okay, you're living within your means, but you're spending more money than you did the last 2 years. That's why the data below is so important. That additional spending is really your CCD, public safety. It's capital driven. So I would say your spending has trended about like your revenues had. It's not out of control, but now you're actually even keeping your capital spending in line with, but like you're saying, hey, we're doing big capital this year in 26. We got big capital we're going to do. It's going to show a bump in spending, but it's a planned bump. Like the mayor said, you're not borrowing money. You're taking money out of cash reserves. It's planned to happen. And the other thing I would say is, you guys are getting it, and hopefully, so you're like, well, Eric isn't a liar. Then he told us the truth. Like, remember a couple years ago, I said you would get to where you would be more self-sufficient. I wouldn't have to be here. Amber wouldn't have to be here all the time. Think in 25, how often we were involved in this. Think of this year. I mean, you guys kind of got your papers, you filled them out, you turned them into the mayor, they turned them into us. We came over a few times. I came to a few meetings. Like, you're getting to where we're just kind of oversight and building this plan. You guys are running it. And hopefully some of you guys remember I told you that 3 years ago, you would get to that.
And advising, which we appreciate.
Yes.
With the police department and the city hall, appreciate Baker Tilly. We had our kind of estimated budget in our mind and gave that information to Eric, and they went through, and they're the ones that added that project, split it up between 3 different funds proportionally, and I appreciate that too, because that's huge. That's not our field of expertise, because you factor in the 5-year plan. It's not just, you're not just looking at the current year. So I appreciate the help on that too. And it's the same way with the city hall remodel. We'll do that next year. Work on where we're going to pull those funds from. And still remain in good position. So
Exactly.
thanks for that.
Keith, you have something?
Yes, I guess the question on why we're on expenditures and everything going on in the world, are we sitting okay with what we budgeted fuel costs right now? Should that be changing? Or is it kind of an unknown? Or we leave where we're at and we have to do appropriation?
Well, we factored in increases in all
Yeah.
the budgets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, we do
Yeah,
have.
I know, but when we kind of talk in meetings, the fuel was kind of.
Yeah, never know.
Yeah, and that's one where we budgeted a buffer. We know kind of what's going on in the Middle East. Who knows how it'll end up and what this could mean in a couple of months. But that's where I go to that 3 to 4% buffer. It's perfect because, yeah, is 3 to 4% enough for fuel? No, because fuel could be 25% up next year. But when you take 3 to 4% on your entire budget, that's a few $100,000 a buffer. That can cover a fuel unknown, if you will. Actually, if I can add one more piece to that, what you just said, Chief, is I think a perfect example because a lot of communities fall into that trap where it's like, well, there's an unknown in fuel. There's an unknown and I might hire this employee. There's an unknown that we may need a new police car that I'm not 100% sure. And every department has those unknowns. If like they used to, if every department budgets all that in there, that's how you end up with a 10, 15% over budget. That's why I want you to keep it tight, and then we'll have enough buffer to kind of cover 1 or 2 unknowns throughout the year. All right, next few slides, I'm not going to go, it's a ton of data, but this is how we build the report. This has all of our assumptions in it for revenue, expenditures. I like to have this in here because then if there's a question like, well, how'd you guys get to this number? And I'm not around to answer the question. You can kind of come back here and look at these couple of pages and it really shows you how we build. And it's all connected in Excel. It shows you how we build this entire plan. Page 11, not going to go through this either, but this is observations and considerations. I've talked about most of these, but these are the kind of, hey, you should do this, or hey, this is a Senate Bill 1 impact we need to mitigate, or hey, here's an opportunity or option you have at your fingertips. And then I tell you, we built this into the report where you see like currently shown in report or see page A6. We're showing some of these because we're going to say this is a best practice. You should do this type thing. Okay, so this is kind of the notes page from a council member, I would say, standpoint. All right, let's tie it all together on page 12 and then, so I'm doing on time. Pretty good on time. Bear with me about 20 more minutes. I'm going to tie this all together on page 12 and go through some charts. Page 12, if you look at the left-hand top side, this takes all of your major funds, not utilities. We talk about utilities separate in their own reports, but takes your city, fire, and redevelopment funds, shows them in groupings, and then also shows them in total. So even though you can't take TIF dollars and move them to a property tax fund or vice versa, you're using TIF to fund similar projects like the PD department. You're using fire territory to kind of operate part of the city, even though the fire territory is its own taxing unit. So I'm looking at kind of all the tethered funds, if you will, holistically on this and individually. If you go to the bottom line, 2023, you will see all of those funds added up. In 2023, you had a $3 million positive cash flow. So great. Historically, you guys have built cash. That's why you're so healthy. That same trend has held relatively steady the last few years, and we anticipate it continuing into 26 and future years. 27, you'll see a little bit of a negative cash flow. That's to what the mayor said earlier. If you look at the individual funds, that's all driven by those large projects. Okay, it's not operationally driven, it's project driven, it's planned. But if you look over the 5 years, purple bottom right, over the next 5 years, we actually anticipate with this plan, you'll generate positive cash flow close to $9 million. That includes the income tax changes and Senate Bill 1 impacts I talked about. Okay, you're in very, very good shape because you've done tight budgeting, and this assumes you do some of the proactive things we are suggesting, like if legislation doesn't change, you opt into the county rate. Doesn't mean the county keeps the rate where it is, but the assumption is if the county keeps the rate relatively similar to taxpayer impact, you're actually a winner in that. Like I showed you on that prior slide, that's helping you boost cash here. This can change. This is what we know today. This is a model that we can easily change when legislation does change. This also has built in all those capital projects we talked about, police department, city hall, using cash, and you're still looking in good shape. The second piece that I do then is I look at that same column, I look individually at funds, okay? Because even though we're good holistically, we can't use money from certain funds to help other funds. So right away I go to fire territory in the middle there. Over the next 5 years, we anticipate fire territory, if they spend their budgets as anticipated, will actually reduce cash reserves about $600,000. Fire territory is an issue we got to continue trying to solve, okay, with either city funding, additional additions to the fire territory, etc. That is the one I would say I have the most concern with because it is self-contained and you can only do so much. You're probably looking at, if you don't expand your fire territory in future years, you're probably looking at similar to what we did here a few years ago for the apparatus. You're going to have to probably use city dollars or help city dollars to help with fire because you just can't increase your revenues. I think the chief has done a pretty good job at getting the budget as bare bones as you can to keep operating the way that you want. There's not a lot of other options out there. That's one we're going to talk about every single year. You go above into the city funds, you see a handful of funds that have red, negative cash flows, but the thing I would say is the vast majority of those are capital funds like CCD, public safety lit, and CEDIT. Now, public safety lit and CEDIT are a little bit misleading because you see a big negative cash flow in 2030 for those, but you see a big positive cash flow for the general fund. You guys see that in the 2030 column, how you have a negative $1 million in public safety lit, a negative 420 in CEDIT, but a positive 3.3 million in general. Everybody follow me those numbers I just pointed to? You'll see that when I go through some charts or if you look at the individual data in here. That's because in 2030, the income tax goes away from CEDIT and public safety lit, and it all starts going to the general fund. Okay? So what you're going to do if the legislation didn't change is you're going to need to spin down public safety lit and CEDIT to zero over the next. So you're going to have negative cash flows. You're going to build cash in general. And when you're out of money in public safety lit and CEDIT, all those costs are going to go to your general fund.
So at that point in time, 2030, I wouldn't have general analytics, it's going all general.
You're still going to have as things stand today, you're still going to have a public safety lit and a general budget, because until public safety lit gets to zero, you're going to budget costs out of there. Does that make sense? Once it's spent down, then you're just going to have a general fund budget. Make sense? That could all change here, but that's where we stand today. And if you go down then to the bottom, the chart, I think this is the thing that, I mean, you guys are in very good, healthy shape. This includes your TIF and fire territory. The green is your cash balances. The gray line, trend line, is where I say like, hey, I want you above that and you're in good shape. You guys are well above this. This is not a story that's different than what I've told the last few years. What I would say is, I'm not just going to brown nosing you all saying this. It would be very easy for you guys to sit here and look at this picture and say, why do we change anything? Like, we're generating enough cash. If our budgets aren't good, we're going to be in fine shape. If we don't do good capital planning, we're going to be in fine shape because we have cash reserves and we have good revenue sources coming in from our tax base. What you're doing here is being good fiscal stewards and creating a very tight plan that it continues this trend. Okay, and if there's more state legislation that's reduces your revenues, you're going to be one of the communities in the state that I would say is in very good shape to weather that storm. So I'm not telling you, you could say today, why do we keep spending money with Eric? We have no issues to do this. You know, we could, you know, do our budget like we always did and we'd still be in fine shape. And I would say, yeah, you're right, but you wouldn't end up at $58 million at the end of this 5-year plan.
Yeah, I would say that my work with AIM, the mayor's work with all the mayors and the roundtables that he has, some of my work shifting to the county a little bit, because of what we've done, we're kind of a great example to other small rural communities and towns like ours, because we started so early to get to this space, but also to add support to you guys. So you're not coming to us and just spinning with your wishes, hopes, and dreams for your department. Now you have a backbone and somebody who's showing us as council data to say, this is how we're going to get you there, which many communities don't have. I mean, if you sit and watch budget hearings for other communities, the county, they don't have that. They were where we were probably 7 years ago. So it's a testament to the hard work that you guys have all put in, and Eric facilitate that outside perspective to get us to where we need to be, I think.
Agree 100%. All right, the next 15 minutes, I just want to kind of show you how this report works. And I don't want to overwhelm by going through every single page because there's a lot of data here. But I want you to see the model, how it works as you're kind of looking through this on your own. So I'm going to spend a good chunk of time on the general fund and then kind of fly through other funds, okay? So the first page, page 13 of the general fund, this is all the numbers based on that Excel model that we built. Every one of your funds is going to be in here, okay? So a lot of you all sit in departments that are in the general fund. So you're a piece of the general fund, but you don't see your specific department called out here. Because you all, the way the general fund works is it's a pot of revenue, and then it's multiple departments for expenditures. You don't have your own revenue source or bucket. You all share it, okay? So we're looking at it holistically. Down the left-hand side, lines, and we have index numbers there, lines 1 through 22 are the revenues. So this is property tax, income tax, state distributions, locally generated. Break those into categories you should recognize. Your largest two by far are income tax and property tax. And then you have trash fees that operate your trash, pay your trash department as well. Lines 24 through 29 are your expenditures. Okay, so these historical are actuals. We're forecasting out the future. These are lined up just like your budget. If you go back to this budget worksheet and you added up all of the personnel services, the 100s, that would add up to line 25 for all the departments. Same thing for supplies, same thing for other services and charges. And then the one that changes in most funds is capital. And you'll notice on capital outlays, line 28, it says A1 to A3. In a moment, I'll flip you back to A1 to A3. That's your entire capital plan for the city. And those numbers will tie directly back to these cash flows, okay? The number I'm focused on and the number that would tie back to what we talked about at the beginning of this meeting is line 31, cash flow. Even though you're very healthy in cash balance, I want to know in zero-based budgeting, are we at a budget that can be afforded by the current year's revenues? If it's a positive number, it is. If it's a negative number, it is not. If it's a negative number, you have to use cash reserves to fund it, okay? And then line 34 are those cash reserves, building up those cash reserves. Not only is it important to have good cash reserves for changes in legislation, rainy days that you're not anticipating, increased capital costs that maybe came up that something, a disaster like many communities are dealing with some of the flooding that happened here recently. Cash reserves are good for that. Cash reserves also play a very important role in your operations because you're generating in the general fund alone over about $1 million, almost $1.5 million in interest income.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you because of the flooding. And I know I've asked this prior, but the rainy day fund dollars that we have in cash reserves, how many days does that leave us operational without anything else happening? Like if catastrophic hits?
Citywide, I'll answer first, and we can go fund by fund. But citywide, to operate for an entire year, you're probably about $20 million to 25.
So
Not counting utilities. I'm
Right.
only looking at cities. So
Right.
you're about 2 years, which is
to stay alive.
amazing. I
Okay.
would say, like most communities, I will say gold standard is a year, 100%. So you have 100% operations. You don't get another dollar in, you could go a year. Best practice is 50%. So that, because your property taxes only come twice a year. So I say if you can operate a whole half a year with not a dollar coming in, like you're in very, very good shape. You guys are 2 years. You're in excellent shape.
And I think that's just a great data point for general constituents to know, like, this is where we are. And if something happens, just like the floods down south, we're going to be okay.
And that's, I mean, you can use that as an example. It could be tornadoes, flooding, any of that kind of stuff. We're working with some of those communities where, FEMA disaster has been declared, et cetera. They'll get FEMA dollars, but if you don't have cash reserves, FEMA's a reimbursement program. So you have to have the money to pay your contractors and all that to get reimbursed. So if you don't have these dollars, you're looking at short-term loans, financings, you're paying interest. I mean, this gives you a lot of flexibility to solve those problems.
Could be a cybersecurity hack as well. Anything like that. Yep.
So that's the number side. Okay. And every fund's going to have all that detail. And across the top, you'll see 23 to 25 is actual, 26 to 2030 is budgeted or forecasted. 27 numbers, you will see, Ty, back to all the work y'all did earlier in this zero-based budgeting worksheet. Okay. And then we're extrapolating those out from 28, 29, 30. 30 includes the lit changes I talked about earlier. 27, 28, 29, 30 all include those property tax credit changes from Senate Bill 1 I talked about and folding those in. So all this is baked into this number. As an administrator, elected official, fiscal body member, that's great to have all the data. It's a ton. I mean, it would take you a few hours to sift through all this stuff. What I try to focus you on is page 14, the chart, okay? And all these charts are the same. The aqua line is your cash balances and reserves. So that's money that you have in the general fund. Okay? If it's going up, we're anticipating positive cash flows. Going down, the opposite. The gray trend line is that 50%. So you can go half a year. That's that gold, or that's that best practice standard, I would say. I want to see your aqua line above the gray line. Simple way. The red line is red flag. If I start seeing your aqua line trending or going below the red, that's where we have an issue, because that's only a 10% buffer. That's less than 2 months of operations in that fund. The columns or the stacked bars are your spending. Gold is personal services, 100s. Aqua is supplies, 200s. Purple is other services and charges, 300s. And the grayish blue is capital outlays, 400s. Okay, so this is showing you from year to year, how's our spending trending. What I really like about you all is you notice starting, 25, you had some jumps into 26 and 27, but you're really keeping your spending, we anticipate, pretty flat the next several years in your general fund. And your aqua line is trending very positively. Now, keep in mind, some of those jumps in 26, 27, remember we shifted some costs from some other funds to your general fund. You guys remember that in the last few budgets? That's part of why you're seeing that jump, and now it's steadying out. This is a great picture. I could flip through this in a second and say, you're in good shape, move on. But I want you to understand how to read these reports. Now I'm just going to focus on the charts. I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly, fund by fund by fund. Okay, Mayor?
Could I add just a couple things
Yes,
to the
yes,
general
yes.
fund? We did evaluate pilot payments this year for AES, AE, water, and sewer. And I do have the new numbers. So I think Councilman Webb, we've had some questions on this or some conversations, but AES historically has been around 51,000 for a pilot. They are going up to 74,000. This was working with Baker Tilly. There's a max that we could do. And I believe the last time they were changed was around 2018, 2017. So it's been a while. Electric has been at 215,000. They'll go down to 210. Water was 184,000. They're going up 10,000 to 194. And then WPC is currently 405,000. They'll drop down to 395. And that's all based on the basically the
There's mathematical formula
value of
Yep.
the utility itself. So
in your tax
we're
rate.
going to see $18,000 to $19,000 increase in pilot payments.
Do you know what pilot is? Are you understanding what the pilot is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that-
And then just one other thing to point out, you talked about shifting different funds. For 27, we're showing about right now a positive 63,500 going into general. But we shifted about 600,000 from fire territory, the chiefs, the chief, deputy chief, the 2 division chiefs and benefits. Last year we had the administrative assistant in there only for 26 budget. In addition to her, though, we'll have all 4 of the chiefs with fire. So that was 600,000, or else you'd see that number much higher. But I mean, when we looked at the fire territory, you can kind of see why we shifted that. That was a thought process that I learned from other communities, one in particular, Warsaw, and I think it's Wayne Township over there.
Mhm.
I was talking with that mayor to see how they're navigating through that. So we did do that, and obviously put fire in a good position as well. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But we had a fire general fund established, so.
Yep. Good call outs.
Just wanted to share that additional information there.
All right, I'm going to kind of fly through these. I know you've heard me talk enough, but I think at least hitting the graphs. I'm going to go to Riverboat next. Riverboat hockey stick. That's because Riverboat is one of those you get state distributions. It's one of those that's also been talked about for years. Will it go away? Will it not? You typically build up your Riverboat and then use it for some capital project in the future. We just don't have any, but I would call this dry powder for something that may change over the next few years, and you have some cash sitting here. Next page I'm going to go to is 20. This is your MVH and MVH restricted. So this starts to get to what Councilwoman DeWitt was alluding to earlier, where how much buffer do we have? And I gave you that 2 years for the city, but individual funds, it's different. So when you look at your MVH and MVH restricted, where you'll see that aqua line, that your cash balances is trending up. It's the right thing. It's what we want to see. And it's well above the gray line. It's about in line with your capital spending. So the way to read this chart is basically you have 1 year's operations sitting in the bank when that aqua line is basically hitting the top of your columns. Does that make sense to everybody? And how to read this? So you have a 1 year buffer sitting there. Very good shape, very good trends. Local roads and streets, page 22. Again, that's one that's just for some capital items. You typically build this up. It's a smaller fund, but again, you see that hockey stick. What I would say in some of these where you see the hockey stick is don't let that be a false sense of security, so to speak. It's typically what we'll see is over time, in a year or 2 or 3, there'll be some project that maybe wasn't on the plan, or some project that was outside the 5 years rolls on, and you'll see a big column of capital spending, and that'll bring down the cash balance. Okay. So when you see the hockey stick, it's just there's nothing there yet. There probably will be a couple years from now. Parks and Rec, page 24. So this is one where you can see, if you go back to 23 and you look from 23 all the way to 27, great trend. This is one we focused on. We shift some costs, we shift some revenues over. get this thing back built up, and you're almost to a full year. You're almost to the top of that column, which is great, full year of reserve. But you see, as we get into 28, 29, 30, okay, we have some discussions to have. I'm not overly worried because, as the mayor said, we really focused on getting this thing right. We have a very good 27. It's self-sufficient. But now we have some bigger capital items coming in 28, 29, 30. I think that's future discussion on, do we do them? Do we fund them all from park? Do we use other resources to fund them? Do we need them all? So on and so forth. But again, read the chart without looking at the numbers. You see in 28, 29, 30 how your gold, blue, and purple are staying pretty level. What's driving it all is that light blue gray. That's capital. It shows you the jump and the reduction in cash is 400 driven. So now I'm a council member and I say, hey, our budget's fine this year, but I'm worried about future years. What's driving that? You go back to the capital plan, or you sit down with the mayor, you sit down with Eric, and you say, okay, let's talk through, why does it look this way? It's a future decision, but you know about it now. That's the way I would put it. 26, park non-reverting, good shape, self-sustainable fund. We've talked about that one before. Page 28, law enforcement continuing ed, very small fund, self-sufficient, great shape. 30, public safety. Oh, yes.
Sorry, are those grant funding dollars?
Law enforcement continuing ed primarily comes from gun permits.
Okay.
If we just got those numbers last week, again, it stayed consistently the same.
And that's one, I'm probably going to sound dumb asking this, but I haven't understood when they changed the gun permitting laws why we didn't see that reduce more, I guess. I've always wondered that. When Indiana went to the
people
UNF
still want, want the permit.
Well, you gotta have permit to buy, carry in and out. If you go to a gun store.
Okay.
If you don't have permit, you can't leave. 7 days or whatever.
So that's why people still.
Yeah, sometimes your other states will honor
Okay. I just always thought when they passed that legislation, like, all right, we're going to see this fund fall down, and it really hasn't. So, okay. That makes sense, though. I guess I didn't realize that piece to not have to wait the 7 days. Okay. Public safety lit, page 30. This is one where you see, like in 27, that's where we talked about their share, the 1.2 million of the public safety or the police building refurb. So you see that dip, but you're still a full year in advance or in reserves. But you get out to 2030, you see that big dive. That's what I talked about earlier, Chief. You're going to see that in 2030, until you get that fund to zero. We're just going to spend the money. They could change that in state law legislation. The way it's written right now, the way we interpret it, somebody could interpret it different, is public safety is restricted for public safety. Those dollars came in restricted for public safety. So you can't take those dollars now just because this legislation say, okay, we're going to send them to the general fund and spend them on whatever we want. We have to spend it down on the original intent until it's zeroed out. That's our interpretation. 32 CCD, again, this is capital driven. That's why you'll see the biggest chunk in the columns is the gray. You'll see in 2029, there's some capital. We'll talk about that when we get to the capital plan, but still great shape. CCI, that's cigarette tax money, same thing. You save it up, you build it up. You have a capital expenditure with the gray bars every once in a while. That's the intent of it. Now let's transition into seed it, 37. Yeah, 37, seed it. Same thing I just talked about with public safety lit. You're going to see this go down. It's almost all driven by capital and debt service because you have a little bit of a debt service payment. And looking at that, Spencer, we need to change the color for debt so it doesn't match capital. That gets confusing. Just notice that. But you'll see the same thing as public safety lit. When you get to 2030 and beyond, you're going to start seeing this come down until it gets zeroed out. Few miscellaneous funds I'm going to skip over that we don't even have charts for. These are some of your bond construction fund dollars. We just put these in here primarily for Lori and the mayor, just because you're tracking your bond proceeds. You need to spend them down over a few years. Some other miscellaneous funds are in there. Now I'm going to go to fire territory on page 45. You can see right away, I mean, you're probably getting the drift of how to read these charts. You probably see this now, and you probably right away say, oh, that looks a little bit different from the other ones. our aqua line is down kind of in the middle and getting close to gray. Not to belabor the point, that's why we're saying we have some issues to fix here and you don't have a whole lot of tools at your disposal. What the mayor just said is the plan as it currently stands. What I would say is look at the spending though on this. Your spending's not, it's going up about $100,000 a year on an almost $4 million budget. Your spending is reasonable in this fund. It's a revenue side issue. And then 47 is that cumulative fire equipment fund. That's the one that you have to use on capital, and you'll notice it's building up, and then you have a large expenditure in 2030. You'll see that on the capital plan when we get to that detail. All right, redevelopment is the next section. If you go to 49, this is your 44, 45 TIF fund, so includes those 4 main TIF areas that you have. Again, redevelopment, primarily spending on capital, the gray bars. You'll see, again, building up cash. I would anticipate you'll have some redevelopment, some development incentive needs, et cetera, over the next few years, and this plan changes, but you can see right away you have the flexibility to do so, which is a good thing.
What's dropping off there so we're gaining momentum? Is that the Auburn crossings? I think we had
Auburn
one or
Crossings
two.
drops off after 28.
Okay.
And then the next couple of TIF funds we don't even have graphs for because they're relatively small. And then if you go to the next section, it starts on A1. I'll spend a little bit of time here because I know many of you don't see this detail very often. This is your capital plan, okay? I know it's small. We send a lot of times to the administration like this on legal paper, so you guys can print it. Brandy can get it for you if your eyes are like mine and you can't see this stuff great. The way this works, and this matches up to, remember the last page of these zero-based budgeting documents all had a capital snapshot? Those match right back to this. This is just holistic view, okay? So definitely at council level, this is what I would look at because it shows you everything. Left-hand side where it says department, that's the department requesting it. So this is the department that brought this up or says it's needed, okay? Some of these that don't really fit in a department, we put under mayor because it's not like a specific department. So it's not like the mayor saying we need to do all of these. It's just they don't really fit in another department. So we earmark them to the mayor. But you'll see police, streets, IT, so on and so forth. Next column, project description. Again, something that's gotten better over the last several years is hopefully this is meaningful to everyone. I know there's some street projects and things in the past. Somebody calls it one thing, we call it something different. So if something doesn't jive or you're like, what is this even talking about? Let us know so we can put a better name to it. That tells you what it is. Funding source. The mayor alluded to this earlier. This is really where we take all of this information, this 5-year plan, and we recommend work with the mayor and Lori and say, hey, this is where we think your most efficient funding comes from. That's why you'll see projects like the PD Reno being split between multiple funds because we're saying these are the funds with the best cash balance, the most flexibility. This is how we'd split the project up, okay? That's our suggestions. It's been tweaked and modified over the years. I think we're in a pretty good spot there. So that's, if you're trying to tie this back to the pages I just went through, all those detail pages, you look at funding source column, you look at the dollars in 2027, those all would tie back to your Form 1 400 budget. Okay. Then you get into 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It's the dollar amounts earmarked. A lot of these are based on estimates provided by your architectural or engineering firms or your department heads. I'm not going to say everybody's the greatest estimator in the world. I think most people try to be conservative. So hopefully we have realistic dollars estimated here.
Eric, on
Yes.
that page, I know we have Spencer up on the screen. We recently received notification that there's a delay in the environmental piece to the railroad overpass,
Yes.
and that just recently has been pushed out to 2031. So anything highlighted in red, if we could shift to 2031,
Yep.
That would definitely make this report.
So Spencer, did you catch that on the red railroad overpass? Now it's 2031. What I would do, because that moves it outside the 5 years, in our Excel, move it out into the margins so it doesn't show up here, but keep these lines on here and just asterisk them and say costs anticipated 2031. So you'll show zeros for all of those, but we won't lose sight of the next year. They'll fold back in.
Thanks.
If you flip to A2, the next page, it's a continuation. Now we get down into parks and fire, same thing. And then we add all of these up at the bottom. So you can see, depending on the year, you're spending anywhere from $5 million to, in a heavy year, $21 million in capital anticipated. Now, that $21 million, what the mayor just talked about, that's the railroad overpass. That wasn't all going to be funded by the city, because we show both in here, city funding, CCMG funding, outside funding, if you anticipate grants, reimbursements, et cetera. Okay. So when we take railroad overpass off, you're really looking $5 to $11 million typically in cost.
And just a reminder that overpass was an 80-20 with the federal grant
Yes.
funding.
Yep.
But does it need to be 100% funded by the city? I'm not sure. Upfront, do we get 80% back?
They cover 80%. In the initial stages, some of the things we're doing is reimbursed that way. But when it comes to construction, it's,
Here, I see railroad overpass listed, Wayne Street Railroad, other streets as well. That might be for different.
Wayne Street Railroad grade separation right away NDOT reimbursement.
I'm not sure if that gets moved back, not 31. Is that
we shifted that to 1 year already. We're gonna do that.
Because that's different than the state project, correct?
It's tied to the same thing, but the highlighted in red is the construction.
Gotcha. Okay.
Everything up to that point, that has been an 80-20 reimbursed.
Okay. So-
Shifted in the plan last
So keep those in 28 and 29.
year. Yes, we
Okay.
shifted those.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So I think that's something too. It's I'll say good talking point. It's just a good understanding point of, yeah, you're sitting on good cash balances. Yes, you've done zero-based budgeting. Yes, you're in a great trajectory, but don't lose sight. And I'm not talking utilities, because utilities are in the millions of dollars too of capital, but you're spending probably on average to just keep up, make sure your infrastructure is in good shape, updating outdated things that have maybe been put off for many, many years, but you're spending on average probably about $6.5 to $7 million a year in capital for a city this size. And that's just being proactive. I mean, that's not uncommon. I mean, you're running a big multi-million-dollar business here. The bottom, or A3, this then summarizes everything above. So if you took that funding source middle column, this adds it up by each of the individual funds. So these numbers would tie directly back to the financial plan cash flows we just looked at over the last 20 minutes. And then the end of this is just outstanding debt. We've got some of the payment in lieu of tax calculations that the mayor talked about. It's just backup information. So really you've got it all in one place. How we built the report, what assumptions were made, and how we're getting to these recommendations.
I might have missed, do you have the wheel tax calculated in here?
Yes, that's actually in the miscellaneous funds page. Yep, 38, 39. Good call out. I should have showed you those direct. So you see those starting to roll on in 27.
What do you say?
These are now updated for the most recent info that I think we just recently sent over to you,
Okay.
Mayor.
Great. And then once we decide what happens with the MUST task force or whatever, then we'll know where we're going.
We'll know better. Obviously, that's just a recommendation. The actual decision won't be made until right now, 28.
Mhm.
But if, let's say, that MUST task force comes out and says the county's not going to adopt the tax rate, so they were going to reduce the tax rate, or they're going to increase it,
Mhm.
we would update this report.
We have that meeting on September 8th, our
Okay.
first initial meeting at the county.
Nice. Yes, good.
And just a reminder, the last council meeting, when we had the second reading for wheel tax, that was the information I handed out that we received from Baker Tilly with the breakdown of what our expected revenues are from there.
Is there any department head or anybody that didn't get one of these that you want to hand out to? 'Cause okay, yeah, the utilities have separate reports. I'm done unless there's questions.
No, I just would like to say thank you. And we have been working with the utilities to kind of get their budgets in order. I don't think we're too far off from being completed with those. I would say by the end of September.
Yeah, I think they're done. Just I need to review them one more time.
Yeah, and then we'll be sitting down internally with departments again, so we can present those, I believe, at the first meeting in November, whatever that date is. So, but we're definitely ahead of the game this year, which is great.
If Brandy could get these documents out digitally to council, since some weren't here, is that something you could send?
Spencer did already. Yeah. Can you send these sets? Yep.
Perfect. That'd be great. Yep. That way council members can review and if they have questions, they can reach out.
And Eric and Spencer, I will only have two things that I'll email over in regards to the fire cum fund, and or actually both items have to do with the fire cum fund. Simple things that were just left off. So
Perfect.
that chief had in there, and then. Yeah, if you'd like to, it's very simple. We just need to have refurb for 27 at 150, and then add in, which I believe you have it in the report. We were just missing it on the Form 1, was the 22,000 for the Station 1 garage door replacement.
Yep, and you got both of those already, Spencer, right? The tender at 150 and the Form 1 garage door add to the Form 1s, and then also move the red overpass out of capital. And yeah, let's make those changes before you send them to Brandy.
And that's every change that I had written down. So
Perfect.
we're speaking good shit.
I'd like to say again, I said last meeting, is that the statewide problem of fire territory funding, and everybody, you and us and everybody that's having problems needs to lobby the state legislature and give us options to be able to fix that.
Well, there are options. The options are a fire territory or a fire district. So that's what's on the table.
One of the conversations we had about a month ago, beginning of August here, we had Representative Smaltz and Senator Johnson in here. It was Auburn, Garrett, and Butler. We were just having discussions, and that was one of the things that came up because all three of us have a territory. And I said, we haven't been able to reset our rate's been set for 20 years. Yes, it has been able to go up. One of the comments Senator Johnson had is, we're 5 cents below that max 40 cents that was set, was it last
years ago?
Two
Two
and 25. And so that is something he said he was going to look at maybe pursuing, that as long as we stay under whatever that cap is, maybe that's an option that we have on the table.
That would be great, because to your question, Councilman Webb, you can't right now go to that cap on your own.
Correct.
So if they would make legislation where it would just take a vote of the fiscal body, that would be a fix for the next several years, at least for you all.
Yeah.
I would also say, you talked about Musk, Natalie. There is a 0.4 fire EMS lit rate, but the county, that's a county decision. So I think that's, as you guys form this must and however you're doing that, I think you want to have a vocal point of that would be helpful too.
Yeah, and that could make the territory whole as well for all of
Yes.
our communities. Unfortunately, if we want to expand the territory or dissolve the current and reestablish, that's not something that we can force on somebody. That's got to be a voluntary thing with those departments. As for a district, that may be something the county looks into, but I can say for me, and I'll be open, I'm not interested for the city of Auburn. By no means. I think either way that stays separate.
To do.
If there was a district,
Oh.
the city municipalities have the option to be a part of that, but I would not be in favor of that. I think we keep it separate. But
I think we would just need to see what the opportunities are, the pros and cons for fire territory versus a district. I think, Allen County has some pros and cons with how they've been able to do it or not do it, I suppose. But we really don't have a study that shows us that, or a fiscal either. So
There's plenty of mechanisms, I think, that we'll have to make the fire territory whole. Still could be an option to dissolve and reestablish with another township. Who knows?
mhm.
So
Anybody else? Great meeting, guys. Thank you so much for your hard work. And then we're not reconvening again. You'll have, you're going to get us all the updates from Spencer. He's going to fix those 2 things with fire. And then drop dead date is September.
26th it
26th.
has to be at, but we need, I would say, back that up a week if
Yeah.
there is things, just so we can work
But
with
I
Lori
think,
to.
I mean, you're in good shape. Okay. All right.
Are we gonna have any kind of meeting about elected officials' salaries?
I'll send that out today.
Okay,
It's on my list.
but first, you're gonna look at a scheduled meeting to discuss that, or
If you'd like to.
you know, one of the options?
Sure. I'll
Go
send that
to
out
some
today
committee.
with all the data.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting adjourned.